The transport shuttle detached from the human vessel with a soft hiss, and Dr. Adrian Cole pressed his face against the viewport like a child seeing snow for the first time. The orbital research station Harmony stretched before him, a massive ring of interconnected modules that sparkled with lights from a dozen different species. He had dreamed of this moment for 3 years, ever since the Galactic Xenobiology Institute had sent their invitation to Earth. Adrian checked his bag one more time. Research pad, sample collectors, spare clothes, and a photo of his golden retriever, Murphy. He smiled at the picture. Murphy was staying with his sister while he worked out here, but the separation hurt more than he expected. The shuttle docked with a metallic clunk. The airlock cycled through its sequence, and Adrian stepped into a corridor that smelled like ozone and something sweet he could not identify. 2 figures waited for him. The first was Dr. Chithra, an insectoid researcher whose body resembled a praying mantis but with beautiful patterns across her exoskeleton that shifted colors as she moved. The second was Professor Wendell, a being made entirely of swirling gases contained within a transparent floating sphere. Dr. Cole, Chithra's voice came through a translation device on her thorax. Welcome to Harmony. We are pleased to have the first human researcher join our institute. Thank you, Adrian said, extending his hand before remembering that handshakes might not be universal. He lowered it awkwardly. Chithra tilted her triangular head, an interesting greeting gesture. We have read about this in the human cultural files. A physical contact to establish friendly intent? Something like that, Adrian replied. Wendell's sphere pulsed with colors. His translated voice sounded like wind chimes. We have much to discuss, Dr. Cole. Your species has presented us with a fascinating research opportunity. They led him through the winding corridors of the station. Adrian saw beings he recognized from his studies and many he did not. A slug-like creature slithered past, leaving a glowing trail. A group of beings with too many joints in their arms stood in a circle, their conversation sounding like clicking stones. Everything was new and wonderful. Here is our primary laboratory, Chithra said, gesturing to a door that slid open. Inside was a space 3 times larger than any lab Adrian had worked in on Earth. Habitats lined the walls, each containing creatures from different worlds. Tanks of water held swimming things. Glass boxes held crawling things. Suspended chambers held flying things. We study social bonds across species, Professor Wendell explained. How creatures form groups, establish hierarchies, and cooperate for survival. Most bonds serve clear evolutionary purposes: genetic propagation, resource sharing, protection from predators. Adrian nodded, walking slowly past the habitats. In one, a small reptilian creature with golden scales watched him with bright eyes. In another, a blob of bioluminescent jelly pulsed gently. A third contained something that looked like a carnivorous plant with snapping appendages. Your research focus? Adrian asked. Currently, we are preparing to study a phenomenon unique to humans, Chithra said. Her mandibles clicked together in what might have been excitement. Preliminary reports from Earth suggest your species engages in what you call pack bonding, forming loyal emotional attachments to group members beyond simple utility. That is not uncommon in social species, Adrian said, still looking at the creatures. Not to this degree, Professor Wendell's sphere brightened. Human pack bonds appear to override logic, survival instinct, and even genetic imperative. Humans have died protecting non-relatives. You form permanent attachments that serve no reproductive benefit. This behavior appears irrational by our models. Adrian smiled. We just care about each other. About those we consider family. Exactly, Chithra said. We wish to understand this mechanism. How it forms, what triggers it, what maintains it. You are here to help us study human pack bonding behavior. They showed him to his quarters, a comfortable room with adjustable atmosphere controls and a viewing port that looked out at Tidal 7, the blue water world below. Adrian unpacked his few belongings, setting Murphy's photo on the desk. Over the next few days, Adrian settled into the routine of the research station. He attended briefings, reviewed protocols, and met other researchers. Everyone was polite but distant. They treated interaction as a professional exchange of information, nothing more. On his 4th day, Adrian was cataloging samples in the main lab when a small maintenance drone floated past, its sensors clicking as it checked air quality. Without thinking, Adrian spoke to it. Hey there, buddy. Doing a good job keeping everything clean? The drone paused, its sensors focusing on him. Adrian chuckled. Sorry, you probably do not understand me. Dr. Cole? Chithra had entered the lab without him noticing. "Why are you addressing the maintenance unit?" Adrian felt his face warm. "Oh, just a habit. We tend to talk to things back on Earth, even machines." "Fascinating." Chithra made a note on her research pad. "You assign social recognition to non-sentient objects?" "I guess so," Adrian said. He had never really thought about it before. That evening, Adrian found himself alone in the lab during off hours. Most researchers returned to their quarters after their shifts, but Adrian enjoyed the quiet time to observe the specimens. He stopped in front of the habitat with the small golden reptilian creature. She was curled in a corner, and something about her posture seemed sad to him. "Hello there," he said softly. "You look lonely." The creature lifted her head, her eyes focusing on him. Adrian noticed a data tag on the habitat. Subject 47 juvenile saurian Virtus origin. Subject 47 seems too formal, Adrian said. "You need a proper name." "How about Pip? You are small and bright like a little pip of gold." Pip moved closer to the glass, tilting her head. Adrian smiled and sat down on the floor across from her habitat. He pulled out his research pad and began reading his files aloud, his voice gentle in the quiet lab. Pip listened, her golden scales catching the light. Neither of them noticed the security camera recording everything. Across the station, Professor Wendell reviewed the footage with Chithra. "He is bonding with a research specimen," Wendell said. After only 4 days, Chithra replied, her exoskeleton pattern swirling with colors that indicated confusion. "We have not even begun formal study protocols." "The human appears incapable of preventing bond formation," Wendell observed. "This will require significant analysis." They watched as Adrian continued reading to Pip, completely unaware that his simple act of kindness had just become the foundation of a revolutionary scientific study. 3 weeks had passed since Adrian arrived at Harmony Station, and Dr. Chithra found herself studying the human more than any other research subject in her career. She sat across from him now in the small interview room, her research pad recording every word and gesture. "Tell me about your family structure on Earth," Chithra said, keeping her voice neutral and professional. Adrian leaned back in his chair, relaxed in a way most species never were during formal interviews. "Well, I have a sister, parents, some cousins. Pretty standard. And you maintain bonds with all of them despite geographic separation and no immediate survival benefit?" "Of course," Adrian said, looking puzzled. "They are my family. Distance does not change that," Chithra made notes. "What about non-relatives? Do you form similar attachments?" "Sure, friends, colleagues, people I meet and connect with." Adrian smiled. "My best friend lives halfway across Earth, but we talk every week. Have for 15 years. 15 years of maintained contact with no genetic relationship and no shared resources," Chithra repeated slowly. "And you consider this normal?" "Very normal." Before Chithra could ask her next question, an alarm chirped from the main lab. Her antennae twitched with irritation. "We must pause. There is an issue with one of the specimens." They rushed to the lab together. Several researchers had gathered around Subject 47's habitat, their various forms of concern evident. The small golden saurian was darting around her enclosure in distress, her movements frantic and uncoordinated. "The containment seal malfunctioned," explained a researcher named Oren, whose rock-like body shifted with worry. "Subject 47 briefly escaped before we could restore the barrier." Adrian pushed through the group without hesitation. "Where is she now?" "Behind the storage units," Oren pointed. "But Dr. Cole, she's exhibiting aggressive fear responses. Protocol requires we use the sedation system." Adrian was already moving. He crouched down near the storage units, making himself small. "Pip, it is okay, sweetie. Nobody is going to hurt you." Chithra's mandibles clicked in surprise. "You named the specimen?" Adrian ignored her, continuing in that same soft voice. "I know you are scared. Everything is too loud and too bright out here, is it not? Come on, let me help you get back home." Pip's small head poked out from behind a container. She was trembling, her scales dull with stress. "That is it," Adrian whispered. "You remember me, right? We have been spending time together." He slowly extended his hand, palm up, making no sudden movements. "Dr. Cole, that is a research specimen," Professor Wendell warned, his sphere pulsing red. "You should not have unauthorized physical contact." "She is frightened," Adrian said simply. "She needs help." Pip crept forward, sniffing at Adrian's hand. Then, to everyone's shock, she climbed onto his palm. Adrian carefully stood, cradling the small creature against his chest. He walked to her habitat and gently placed her inside, his hand lingering to stroke her head once before withdrawing. "There you go," he murmured, safe and sound. The lab was silent except for the hum of equipment. Finally, Chithra spoke. "You have been visiting Subject 47 during off hours." It was not a question. Adrian met her compound eyes. "Yes, she seemed lonely. I have been reading to her, talking to her. Sometimes I bring her treats from the kitchen that match her dietary needs. I check the nutritional database first." "Treats," Chithra repeated flatly. "She likes the purple fruit cubes best," Adrian said, as if this was completely reasonable. Oren gestured to his monitoring station. "Dr. Chithra, you should see this." He pulled up data streams showing Subject 47's biological readings over the past 3 weeks. Her stress hormones have decreased by 40%. Activity levels increased. She is even showing better feeding responses. "The human has been conditioning the specimen," Professor Wendell observed. "No," Adrian said firmly. "I have been keeping her company." "There is a difference." Chithra felt something unfamiliar stirring in her thorax. Was it curiosity? Confusion? She decided to investigate further. "Dr. Cole, please wait here." She left the lab and accessed the station's security systems. The recording showed exactly what she suspected. Adrian had been visiting the lab every evening for the past 2 weeks. But he was not just spending time with Subject 47. The footage showed him sitting beside a habitat containing a bioluminescent blob, playing what appeared to be a pattern game with the creature. He would tap on the glass in a sequence and the blob would light up in response, creating matching patterns. Adrian laughed with genuine delight each time the blob succeeded. Another recording showed him near the carnivorous plant specimen, talking to it while carefully trimming dead leaves from its environment. "There you go, Snapper," his voice came through the speakers. "That should help you grow better." He had named them. All of them. The blob was Glow, the plant was Snapper. Subject 47 was Pip. 3 different species from 3 different worlds. And the human had formed individual relationships with each one. Chithra returned to the lab where Adrian was sitting on the floor near Pip's habitat again, watching her settle down from her scare. "Dr. Cole, how many of our research specimens have you been interacting with?" Adrian had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "A few, maybe 6 or 7. I know I should have asked permission first, but they all seemed so isolated." "Do you know Glow has basic pattern recognition? She is actually quite intelligent. And Snapper responds to different tones of voice. I think she knows when I'm happy versus sad." "You have been sharing your meals with them," Chithra said. "Just small portions. I made sure everything was safe for their biology first." Adrian stood up, brushing off his pants. "Look, I know this probably seems weird to you, but I could not help it. They are living beings kept in boxes for study. The least I can do is give them some companionship." Professor Wendell floated closer, his sphere cycling through colors that indicated deep thought. "Dr. Cole, you have been on this station for 21 days. You have formed what you consider meaningful bonds with multiple non-human, non-intelligent creatures that you have no biological connection to, and that provide you no tangible benefit. Is this accurate?" "When you put it like that, it sounds strange," Adrian admitted. "But yes, I guess so." Chithra and Wendell exchanged what might have been glances if either of them had eyes in the traditional sense. "Dr. Cole," Chithra said carefully, "we asked you here to help us study human pack bonding. We expected to observe the phenomenon through controlled experiments over many months." "Okay," Adrian said. "You have already provided us with more data than we anticipated." Chithra's pattern swirled with excitement. "You are the experiment, Dr. Cole. We wish to study you studying them." Adrian blinked. "Oh, with your permission, of course," Professor Wendell added. "But this could revolutionize our understanding of social bonds. You are demonstrating pack bonding behavior with species that have no capacity to reciprocate in any meaningful way." "They do reciprocate," Adrian protested. "Pip gets excited when she sees me. Glow plays games with me. Snapper leans toward my voice." "Exactly," Chithra said. "You perceive reciprocation where our instruments detect only basic stimulus response. This is the heart of what we need to understand." Adrian looked at Pip, who had curled up in her favorite corner, her scales already regaining their golden shine. He thought about Glow waiting for their evening pattern games. He thought about Snapper and the way her leaves perked up when he approached. "All right," he said finally. "You can study me studying them, but only if you agree that they get better habitats, more enrichment, more interaction. If I am bonding with them, they deserve the best care possible." Chithra's entire exoskeleton flushed with a color Adrian had never seen before. "Agreed, Dr. Cole, for science." But as she watched the human return to comforting Pip with soft words and gentle presence, Chithra wondered if she was beginning to understand something that could not be measured by instruments or explained by evolutionary models. Something her species had perhaps lost long ago, if they had ever had it at all. The conference room hummed with tension as researchers from 6 different species debated what they had witnessed over the past week. Adrian sat outside in the corridor, unaware that his evening visits to the lab had become the most discussed topic on Harmony Station. Dr. Chithra stood before a holographic display showing neural scans and behavioral data. The evidence is conclusive. The specimens interacting with Dr. Cole show measurable improvements in every wellness metric: reduced stress, increased curiosity, even accelerated healing. "Healing?" asked Oren, his stone-like features shifting skeptically. Chithra pulled up medical scans of Pip. Subject 47 had a minor abrasion on her tail when she arrived. Standard healing time for Saurian juveniles is 10 to 12 days. She healed in 6. The only variable that changed was regular contact with Dr. Cole. Professor Wendell's sphere pulsed thoughtfully. "We must consider the possibility of classical conditioning. The human provides food rewards and speaks in soothing tones. The specimens associate his presence with positive stimuli." A crystalline researcher named Facet chimed in, her voice like glass bells. "I agree with Professor Wendell. This is simple behavioral conditioning, not genuine bonding. The specimens respond to stimuli, nothing more. Pack bonding requires mutual emotional investment, which these creatures are incapable of providing." "Then explain the pattern games with the bioluminescent specimen," Chithra challenged. "Dr. Cole receives no reward. The blob receives no reward, yet they engage in the activity for extended periods with clear signs of mutual enjoyment." "Anthropomorphization," Facet said dismissively. "The human projects emotional states onto creatures that do not possess them." "Perhaps," Chithra said. "Or perhaps we have been underestimating the emotional capacity of species we consider primitive. Either way, we need more data." Oren leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" "A controlled test," Chithra said. "We introduce a new specimen, one known for aggressive tendencies and resistance to socialization. If Dr. Cole's pack bonding ability is as extensive as we suspect, he will attempt to bond with it regardless of the creature's hostility." "That could be dangerous," Professor Wendell warned. "We will take precautions," Chithra assured him. "The specimen will remain in a secure habitat. But if the human can form a bond with something actively hostile to bonding, it will prove that pack bonding is not simply a response to receptive subjects." Facet's crystalline body glinted as she moved. "And when he fails? When the creature remains aggressive and unresponsive? Then we will have learned the limits of human pack bonding," Chithra said. "Either outcome advances our research." The vote was unanimous. They would bring in Subject 89. 2 days later, a heavily armored transport arrived at the station. Adrian watched from the observation deck as the cargo was carefully transferred. Whatever was in that container required 6 security personnel and multiple warning labels. "Dr. Cole," Chithra approached him. "We have acquired a new specimen for study. We thought you might be interested in observing it." Adrian followed her to the lab, where a reinforced habitat had been installed in a corner. The glass was 3 times thicker than the standard enclosures. Warning lights blinked around the frame. Inside paced a creature that made Adrian catch his breath. It was roughly the size of a wolf but built heavier, with metallic-looking fur that shimmered between silver and gunmetal gray. 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows studied everything with predatory intelligence. Its teeth, visible when it snarled at their approach, were designed for tearing. "This is Subject 89, Chithra explained, "a hunting predator from a deathworld called Pharos. The species is known for extreme territoriality and aggression. This individual was raised in captivity but has never shown any social behaviors. Previous researchers concluded it is unbondable." "Unbondable," Adrian repeated softly, never taking his eyes off the creature. "It attacks anything that enters its space. It refuses enrichment items. It barely tolerates the feeding mechanisms. 3 facilities have studied it and all reached the same conclusion. Some species simply do not have the capacity for social bonds. Adrian moved closer to the habitat. The creature's 6 eyes locked onto him, and it lowered its head in a clear threat display. A low growl vibrated through the reinforced glass. "What is its name?" Adrian asked. "It does not have one. It is Subject 89. "That is not a name," Adrian said. "That is a number." He studied the creature's metallic coat, the way the light played across its fur. "Sterling. I will call you Sterling," Chithra made notes. "You are going to attempt bonding with it." "I am going to try being its friend," Adrian corrected. "There is a difference. Dr. Cole, I must warn you that this creature is dangerous. Even through the habitat barriers, you should maintain a safe distance." Adrian smiled gently. "Every creature is dangerous when it is scared and alone. Sterling is not mean. He is defensive. There is a difference." Over the following days, the research team watched with fascination as Adrian implemented his approach to Sterling. He did not try to interact with the creature directly at first. Instead, he simply sat on the floor outside the habitat, his back against the wall, and read from his research pad. "What are you reading to it?" Oren asked one evening. "Human literature," Adrian said. "Old stories from Earth. I started with adventure tales, but Sterling seems to prefer mysteries. He pays more attention when there are puzzles to solve." "The creature cannot understand human language," Facet pointed out. "Maybe not the words," Adrian agreed. "But he understands the tone, the rhythm, the fact that I am here and not trying to hurt him." Sterling paced constantly those first few days, never settling, always watching Adrian with those 6 predatory eyes. But slowly, incrementally, things changed. The pacing became less frantic, the growling less frequent. On the 5th day, Sterling approached the side of the habitat closest to where Adrian sat. "Hello, Sterling," Adrian said gently, not looking up from his reading. "Good to see you too." Sterling sniffed at the glass barrier, his metallic fur rippling. Then he did something that made every researcher watching the security feed freeze in shock. He mimicked the cadence of Adrian's voice. Not the words, but the melodic pattern of it. A rumbling vocalization that rose and fell like speech. Adrian looked up, his face breaking into a genuine smile of delight. "Did you just talk to me?" "That was amazing, Sterling. You are so smart." Sterling made the sound again, his tail swishing slightly. Not the aggressive lashing of before, but something almost curious. "Recording everything," Chithra whispered to Professor Wendell as they watched from the monitoring station. "The creature is attempting communication." "Impossible," Facet said, but her voice lacked its earlier certainty. "Subject 89 has never vocalized except in aggression." "Until now," Professor Wendell observed. Adrian continued his visits, always calm, always patient, always respectful of Sterling's space. He brought a blanket and sat on it during his evening reading sessions. He started sharing his meals, sliding small portions of meat through the feeding port and waiting to see if Sterling would accept them. On the 10th day, Sterling ate while Adrian watched, the first time the creature had fed in a human's presence. On the 12th day, Sterling lay down near the glass while Adrian read, his eyes half closed in something approaching relaxation. Dr. Chithra ran neural scans and found something unprecedented. Sterling's brain was forming new neural pathways, connections that had not existed before, patterns associated with social recognition, with attachment, with what might even be trust. "This should not be possible," Chithra said, staring at the data. "His species does not form bonds. It is not in their evolutionary psychology." "Perhaps it was always there," Professor Wendell suggested. "Dormant, waiting for the right trigger. Or the right human," Oren added quietly. On the 14th day, Adrian made a request that shocked everyone. "I would like to enter Sterling's habitat." "Absolutely not," Chithra said immediately. "Dr. Cole, that creature could kill you in seconds." "He will not," Adrian said with calm certainty. "We trust each other now. I can feel it." "Your feelings are not sufficient data to ensure your safety," Facet argued. "Then look at the scans," Adrian countered. "Look at his behavior patterns. Look at how he responds to me. He is not a mindless predator. He is a person trapped in a cage, and he deserves more than I can give him through glass." The debate raged for hours. Finally, a compromise was reached. Adrian could enter the habitat, but with full safety protocols. Force fields ready to deploy, medical team standing by, and the session would be limited to 5 minutes. Adrian agreed to everything. Every researcher on Harmony Station had found an excuse to be in or near the main lab. The viewing gallery was packed with beings from a dozen species, all watching the monitors that showed Sterling's habitat from multiple angles. Medical equipment hummed on standby, force field generators primed and ready. Adrian stood outside the habitat entrance, breathing slowly and deliberately. His hands were steady, but his heart raced, not from fear of Sterling, but from the weight of what this moment meant. He was about to prove something important, not just to the alien researchers, but to himself. "Final safety check," Chithra said, her voice tight with concern. "Emergency extraction can be triggered manually or automatically if the creature shows aggression. Medical team is ready. Force fields will deploy at the first sign of hostile movement." "Sterling will not hurt me," Adrian said quietly. "You cannot know that," Facet insisted from her position near the control panel. "Yes, I can." Adrian met her crystalline gaze. "The same way I know Pip likes purple fruit cubes and Glow enjoys pattern games at exactly 8 in the evening. The same way I know Snapper prefers when I hum instead of talk. I know Sterling." Professor Wendell's sphere pulsed with colors Adrian had learned meant anxiety. "Dr. Cole, your confidence is noted, but this creature is a predator from a death world. Its instincts are hardwired for violence." "All of us have instincts," Adrian replied, "but we are more than our programming. Sterling has spent 2 weeks learning that not everything wants to hurt him. Now I need to prove it." The habitat door slid open with a hiss. Adrian stepped through before anyone could voice more objections. The door sealed behind him with a finality that made several researchers flinch. Sterling was at the far end of the enclosure, his 6 eyes fixed on Adrian. The creature's metallic fur stood slightly on end, not aggressive but alert, uncertain. Adrian sat down on the floor, cross-legged, making himself small and non-threatening. He did not approach Sterling. He simply waited, his posture open and calm. "Hello, friend," Adrian said softly. "Thank you for letting me visit." Sterling took 1 step forward, then stopped. His nostrils flared, taking in Adrian's scent without the barrier between them. The creature's tail swished, not in anger but in something closer to curiosity mixed with caution. "I know this is scary," Adrian continued in that same gentle tone. "New things usually are, but I promise I am not here to hurt you. I just wanted to sit with you properly. No glass between us, just 2 people spending time together." In the viewing gallery, Chithra's exoskeleton had gone completely still, a sign of intense focus. "Neural activity is spiking," whispered a technician monitoring Sterling's brain patterns. "Multiple regions activating simultaneously." Sterling moved closer, 1 careful step at a time. Adrian remained motionless except for his breathing, his eyes kind but not challenging. When Sterling was within reaching distance, the creature lowered his massive head and sniffed at Adrian's outstretched hand. "There you are," Adrian whispered. "See, just me. Just Sterling. Nothing scary." What happened next would be analyzed and discussed in xenobiology circles for years to come. Sterling, the unbondable predator from a death world, the creature that had attacked every being that entered his space for 3 years, pressed his head into Adrian's palm. Adrian's eyes filled with tears as he gently stroked the metallic fur. It was softer than it looked, warm beneath his fingers. Sterling made a sound. That same mimicking vocalization from before, but gentler now, almost content. "You are wonderful," Adrian said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are so wonderful, Sterling." The creature settled down beside Adrian, his bulk pressing against the human's side. Sterling was easily 3 times Adrian's mass, but he moved with careful deliberation, as if aware of his own strength and Adrian's fragility. They sat like that for the full 5 minutes. Adrian talked quietly about Earth, about his dog Murphy, about the stars and the station and how amazing it was to meet someone like Sterling. The creature listened, his breathing gradually sinking with Adrian's, his 6 eyes slowly closing in trust. When the time limit expired and the door chimed, Adrian stood slowly. Sterling rose with him, following him to the exit. At the threshold, Adrian turned and placed both hands on either side of Sterling's massive head. "I will come back tomorrow," he promised, "and the day after that. For as long as you want me to." Sterling vocalized again, and this time Adrian was certain he heard something like goodbye in the sound. The habitat door closed. Adrian leaned against the wall outside, his legs suddenly weak. Chithra approached him, her antennae vibrating rapidly. That was the most extraordinary thing I have ever witnessed, she said. Dr. Cole, you just formed a bond with a creature deemed biologically incapable of bonding. He was always capable, Adrian said, wiping his eyes. He just needed someone to believe in him. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian's visits to Sterling became routine. The researchers documented everything. Brain scans showed Sterling's neural pathways reorganizing in unprecedented ways. Behavioral observations revealed the creature becoming calmer, more playful even. Sterling started accepting enrichment toys, something he had destroyed or ignored in every previous facility. But the most significant changes were subtle. The way Sterling would position himself near the habitat wall that faced the lab entrance, waiting for Adrian's arrival, the excited vocalizations when he heard Adrian's voice, the careful gentleness with which the massive predator interacted with the comparatively fragile human. He has imprinted on Dr. Cole, Oren observed, reviewing weeks of footage. More than imprinted, Professor Wendell corrected. He has formed a genuine attachment. This is reciprocal bonding, not simple conditioning. Facet examined the data with something approaching awe. I was wrong, she admitted, her crystalline form dimming with what might have been embarrassment. This is not behavioral conditioning. Subject 89, Sterling, has developed social cognition that should not exist in his species. The human did not just befriend him. Dr. Cole activated dormant capacities in Sterling's brain. Which raises a troubling question, Chithra said. How many other species have we deemed unsociable simply because we never provided the right social catalyst? Word of the breakthrough spread through the Galactic Scientific Council. Requests poured in for presentations, data, and analysis. The implications were staggering. If humans could trigger bond formation in supposedly unbondable species, what did that mean for understanding social evolution across the galaxy? Adrian was oblivious to the mounting excitement in the scientific community. He spent his evenings distributed between Sterling, Pip, Glow, Snapper, and the growing number of specimens he had befriended. Each one received individual attention, personal names, and genuine affection. Do you not find this exhausting? Chithra asked him one evening as he sat with Sterling, the massive creature's head resting on his lap while Adrian scratched behind his ears. Not at all, Adrian said. This is the best part of my day. Connecting with them, learning who they are as individuals. But you gain nothing tangible from these interactions, Chithra pressed. No resources, no reproductive advantage, no social status among humans. Adrian looked at Sterling, whose eyes were half closed in contentment. He looked at Pip in her nearby habitat, watching their interaction with bright curiosity. He looked at Glow, pulsing gently in anticipation of their evening pattern game. I gain everything that matters, Adrian said simply. I gain friends. I gain the knowledge that they are happier because I am here. I gain the privilege of being trusted by beings who have every reason not to trust. How is that not tangible? Chithra was silent for a long moment. Your species has a word, she said finally. Love. Is that what you feel for these creatures? Adrian considered the question seriously. Yes, he said. Maybe not romantic love, but love nonetheless. They are part of my pack now, my family, and I would do anything to keep them safe and happy. Even though they cannot reciprocate in ways your species would recognize, they reciprocate perfectly. Adrian smiled as Sterling nuzzled his hand. In their own ways. That is all that matters. In the monitoring station, Professor Wendell watched the exchange with growing realization. We have been asking the wrong questions, he said to the assembled researchers. We have been trying to understand human pack bonding as if it were a mechanism, a process with inputs and outputs. And? Prompted Oren. And it is not a mechanism at all, Wendell said, his sphere glowing bright with revelation. It is a capacity. A fundamental orientation toward connection that humans possess at a level we cannot even comprehend. They do not bond because it serves them. They bond because it is who they are. Warnings blared through Harmony Station at 0300 hours, jolting researchers from sleep and sending them rushing toward the main laboratory. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as security protocols engaged automatically. Adrian was already in the lab when most researchers arrived, having fallen asleep at his desk while reviewing behavioral notes. The source of the crisis was immediately apparent. Multiple habitat containment fields were flickering, their power feeds compromised by a cascade failure in the station's environmental systems. What happened? Chithra demanded as she arrived. her exoskeleton patterns flashing alarm colors. Primary power coupling failed, Oren reported from the engineering station, his stone-like fingers working frantically across the controls. Backup systems are not responding properly. We are losing containment on at least 6 habitats. Adrian's blood ran cold. 6 habitats. That included Pip, Glow, and Sterling. Professor Wendell materialized near the main controls, his sphere crackling with agitated energy. We need to evacuate this section. Several of these specimens are dangerous if released into an uncontrolled environment. We cannot just leave them, Adrian protested. Dr. Cole, this is a safety emergency, Facet said, her crystalline voice sharp with urgency. Protocol requires all personnel to evacuate to safe zones until containment is restored. A terrible cracking sound split the air. One of the smaller habitat barriers shattered, releasing a territorial amphibious creature the size of a large dog. It immediately went into defense mode, inflating a poisonous sac on its throat and hissing at everything around it. Everyone back, Chithra ordered. Security team deploy containment nets. But the creature was fast, driven by fear and instinct. It lunged toward the nearest movement, which happened to be Dr. Chithra. Adrian saw it happening as if in slow motion. The creature's poisonous sac was fully inflated, and Chithra was directly in its path. Adrian did not think. He threw himself between them, taking the impact of the creature's charge against his chest. They went down together in a tangle, the creature's claws raking across Adrian's arm as it scrambled for purchase. Adrian, Chithra's shriek was unlike any sound she had ever made. More cracking sounds echoed through the lab as additional habitats began failing. Sterling's reinforced enclosure shuddered, stress fractures appearing in the supposedly unbreakable glass. The massive predator inside was pacing frantically, agitated by the alarms and the scent of Adrian's blood. Adrian managed to roll away from the amphibious creature, clutching his bleeding arm. Security personnel finally got a net over the panicked animal, but the damage was done. 3 deep gashes ran from Adrian's shoulder to his elbow, and the lab was descending into chaos. Get him to medical, Professor Wendell ordered. But before anyone could reach Adrian, the impossible happened. Sterling's habitat shattered. The creature that emerged was nothing like the gentle companion Adrian had spent evenings reading to. This was Sterling the Predator, the deathworld hunter with 6 eyes blazing and metallic fur standing on end. Every researcher in the lab felt their survival instincts scream in primal terror. Sterling's 6 eyes scanned the room and locked onto the amphibious creature that had hurt Adrian. The predator's lips pulled back from those terrible teeth, and a sound came from his throat that made even the bravest researchers step back. It was rage-given voice. "Containment team, ready sedatives," Oren called out, but his hands were shaking. Sterling moved with terrifying speed, crossing the lab in 3 massive bounds. But he did not attack the researchers. He positioned himself between them and the amphibious creature, which was still struggling against its net. Sterling's message was clear. Nothing else would hurt his human. "Sterling, no," Adrian gasped, trying to stand despite his injury. "It is okay, buddy. I am okay." The massive predator's head swiveled toward Adrian's voice. For a moment, everyone in the lab held their breath. Sterling was out of containment. Adrian was injured and bleeding, and every instinct suggested the creature should be in full predatory mode. Instead, Sterling moved to Adrian's side and lowered his great head, making that mimicking vocalization they had practiced, but edged with concern. He gently nosed at Adrian's wounded arm, whining softly. "I am okay," Adrian repeated, reaching up with his good hand to touch Sterling's head. "You protected me, did you not?" "Good boy, Sterling. Such a good boy." More habitat barriers began failing. Pip's containment flickered and died, and the small golden saurian darted out, racing directly toward Adrian despite the chaos. She climbed up his leg, chirping frantically, her small body trembling. "Pip, sweetie, it is dangerous out here," Adrian tried to say, but the little creature refused to leave him. Glow's habitat was next. The bioluminescent blob oozed out and moved across the floor with surprising speed, positioning herself near Adrian and pulsing bright warning colors at anyone who approached too close. Even Snapper, the carnivorous plant, had somehow extended tendrils from her failing containment, stretching toward Adrian as if trying to reach him. Chithra stared at the scene before her, and something fundamental shifted in her understanding of the universe. 5 different species, from 5 different worlds, all responding to Adrian's distress, not with confusion or opportunistic escape, but with protective behavior. They had formed a pack around the injured human. "Everyone stop moving," she ordered. "Lower all weapons. Deactivate the sedation systems." "Dr. Chithra, this is a serious breach of protocol," Facet objected. "Look at them," Chithra said, her voice filled with wonder. "Really look. They are protecting him, all of them." Adrian sat on the floor, blood dripping from his arm, surrounded by creatures that should have scattered or attacked. Instead, they formed a defensive circle around him. Sterling stood as the primary guardian, his massive bulk shielding Adrian from threats. Pip pressed against his side, offering what comfort her small body could provide. Glow pulsed in patterns that Adrian recognized as distress, and Snapper's tendrils wrapped gently around his ankle. "They are his pack," Professor Wendell said softly, "just as he is theirs." Medical personnel approached slowly, hands visible and movements non-threatening. Sterling growled but allowed them to pass when Adrian spoke to him. They treated his wounds while the creatures watched, anxious but trusting. "We need to secure the specimens," Oren said, though his voice lacked conviction. "No," Adrian said firmly, wincing as the medic sealed the gashes on his arm. "They are scared. Forcing them back into failing habitats will only traumatize them more. Fix the containment systems first. Then we can discuss next steps." "Dr. Cole, you are injured and in shock," Facet pointed out. "I am thinking clearly," Adrian countered. "These are not specimens to be secured. They are people who just went through something terrifying." Sterling broke out of a reinforced habitat that was supposed to be indestructible. "Do you know why? Because he heard me in pain and needed to help. That is not aggression. That is love." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Love. A concept most of the researchers had only understood theoretically until this moment. Over the next hours, engineering teams worked to restore the habitat systems while Adrian remained in the lab, refusing to leave his friends. The creatures stayed close to him, settling only when he was calm. Sterling lay with his head on Adrian's lap, occasionally licking at the bandages as if trying to heal them himself. Pip curled up against his side, finally sleeping peacefully. Glow positioned herself where she could see Adrian's face pulsing gently. Snapper's tendrils remained loosely wrapped around his leg. Dr. Chithra watched it all, documenting everything but also feeling something she had never experienced before. She was worried about Adrian, not as a research subject but as someone she cared about. The realization was startling. When had the human become more than an object of study? When had she started thinking of him as Adrian instead of Dr. Cole? When had his well-being become more important to her than the data he generated? She looked around at the other researchers. Oren was hovering anxiously near the medical team, his usual stoic demeanor cracked. Professor Wendell's sphere kept drifting toward Adrian despite having no logical reason to do so. Even Facet, who had been the most skeptical about emotional bonds, was making small unconscious movements toward the human and his assembled pack. "We have formed bonds with him too," Chithra said aloud, the realization stunning in its simplicity. "All of us. We worry for his safety. We want him to be well. We care what happens to him beyond his research value." "Impossible," Facet said automatically, but she did not sound convinced. "Is it?" Professor Wendell asked. "Or have we been changed by proximity to someone who bonds so freely? Perhaps pack bonding is contagious. Perhaps simply being near a human who cares so deeply teaches others how to care." Adrian looked up at them, his face pale from blood loss, but his smile genuine. "You are my pack too," he said simply. "All of you. Did you think I only cared about the creatures and habitats? Chithra, you always check if I have eaten before starting work. Wendell, you adjusted the air mixture in my quarters without being asked because you noticed I was having trouble sleeping. Oren brings me extra data chips for my research. Facet, you corrected my equations but did it kindly, even when you thought I was wrong about everything. How could I not care about you?" Chithra felt something wet on her face and realized with shock that she was crying. She had not cried since she was a juvenile. The medical bay had become an unusual gathering place over the past 3 days. Adrian lay in the recovery bed, his arm still healing from the deep gashes, but he was far from alone. Sterling occupied most of the floor space, refusing to leave despite multiple attempts to relocate him. Pip had claimed a spot on Adrian's pillow, her golden scales catching the soft medical lighting. Glow sat in a specially prepared container on the bedside table, pulsing contentedly. Even Snapper had been brought in, her pot placed near the window where she could photosynthesize while keeping Adrian in sight. Dr. Chithra entered carrying yet another data pad, though she had stopped pretending she was only here for research purposes. The evaluation team from the Galactic Scientific Council arrives in 2 hours, she said, settling into the chair beside the bed. Right on time to see what a disaster looks like, Adrian said with a weak smile. On the contrary, Professor Wendell floated in behind Chithra, his sphere a calm blue. They are arriving to witness the most significant breakthrough in xenosociology in the past 1,000 years. Adrian shifted carefully, mindful of his bandaged arm and the small saurian on his pillow. I just made friends with some creatures. I do not see how that is a breakthrough. That is precisely why it is revolutionary, Chithra said. Her exoskeleton displaying colors Adrian had learned meant excitement. You do not see what you do as exceptional. To you, forming bonds is as natural as breathing, but for most of the galaxy, Dr. Cole, it is not natural at all. Over the past 3 days, while Adrian recovered, the research team had been compiling their findings. The data was extraordinary, not just the changes in the creatures Adrian had befriended, but the changes in the researchers themselves. Oren had started talking to the equipment in the lab, something he had never done in 40 years of research. Fawcett had been caught bringing extra enrichment items to the habitats even for specimens she was not studying. Professor Wendell had begun expressing preferences rather than pure logic in his decision-making, and Chithra found herself checking on the well-being of her colleagues before reviewing data reports. We have all been changed, Chithra continued. Proximity to you, to your way of relating to the world, has activated something in us. Empathy, care, connection beyond utility. The hypothesis is staggering, Wendell added. Humans do not just bond easily themselves. They create the conditions for bonding in those around them. You are social catalysts, a soft chime announced visitors. The evaluation team filed into the medical bay, their various forms crowding the space. Leading them was an elder being whose species Adrian did not recognize, with flowing appendages and eyes that seemed to see through time itself. I am Coordinator Depths, the being said, their voice resonating with harmonics that bypassed translation. We have reviewed your preliminary findings with great interest, Dr. Chithra, but we needed to see this phenomenon ourselves. Depths approached the bed slowly, taking in the scene. A human, injured while protecting an alien colleague, surrounded by creatures from different worlds who refused to leave his side. Sterling lifted his massive head, 6 eyes watching the coordinator warily but not aggressively. The predator from Pharos, Depths observed. We have documentation of this individual. 3 facilities declared it unsociable, dangerous, unsuitable for any research requiring cooperation. Sterling is not dangerous, Adrian said quietly, his hand resting on the creature's head. He was lonely and scared. Once he understood he was safe, his whole nature changed. Or perhaps his nature was always this, Depth suggested, and he simply needed the right catalyst to express it. The coordinator's appendages rippled thoughtfully. May I? They gestured toward Sterling. Adrian nodded. Ask him. He understands more than people think. Depths extended one appendage slowly toward Sterling. The predator watched it approach, then carefully sniffed it before allowing brief contact. A rumbling sound came from Sterling's chest, not aggressive but communicative. Remarkable, Depth said. He is initiating social contact with a complete stranger. The documented behavior pattern suggested this was impossible for his species. Maybe the documentation was wrong, Adrian suggested. Maybe we have been judging species by their worst circumstances instead of their best possibilities. Over the next hour, Coordinator Depths and the evaluation team conducted interviews, reviewed data, and observed the interactions between Adrian and his unusual pack. What they discovered challenged fundamental assumptions about social evolution. Most species in the galaxy form bonds based on clear evolutionary advantages, Depths explained as they compiled their final assessment. Genetic relatedness, resource exchange, protection benefits. These bonds are transactional at their core, even when they appear emotional. Human pack bonding operates on different principles, Chithra added, presenting brain scans and behavioral data. Humans form bonds because the bonding itself is rewarding. They do not require reciprocal benefit. They do not require genetic similarity. They do not even require the other being to be capable of traditional bonding behaviors. And in forming these bonds, Professor Wendell continued, humans create conditions that allow latent social capacities to emerge in other species. Sterling developed neural pathways that did not exist before. The researchers on this station have begun expressing emotional attachments we thought our species incapable of. Dr. Cole has not just made friends. He has rewritten the social programming of everyone around him. Coordinator Depps was silent for a long moment. If this is true, if humans can serve as catalysts for cross-species social bonding, the implications are profound. We could be looking at a fundamental restructuring of how different species interact throughout the galaxy. There is more, Facet said. Her crystalline form dimming with what Adrian had learned was her version of humility. We must address our methodology. We kept these creatures in isolation, studied them as specimens rather than individuals, and concluded that lack of social behavior meant incapacity for social bonds. We were wrong. We created the conditions that prevented the very behaviors we claimed to study. Adrian spoke up from the bed. They were not incapable of bonding. They were lonely. There is a difference, yes, Depps agreed. A crucial difference we have apparently been missing for generations. The coordinator turned to Chithra. Your recommendation? Chithra had prepared for this question. We propose the establishment of a new research institute focused on human-facilitated cross-species integration. Not studying humans as curiosities, but learning from them how to create environments where social bonds can flourish between species that would otherwise never connect. And these creatures? Depth gestured to Sterling, Pip, Glow, and Snapper. They are not research subjects anymore, Adrian said firmly, his voice gaining strength despite his injuries. They are people. Individuals with preferences and personalities and the right to choose their own paths. If you want to continue studying pack bonding, you need to treat everyone involved with respect and dignity. Agreed, Depth said without hesitation. Dr. Cole, the Council would like to offer you a position as director of this new institute. Your task would be to develop protocols for cross-species social integration and to train others in creating bonding-friendly environments. Adrian was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking Sterling's metallic fur. On one condition, he said finally. Every being in the Institute gets proper enrichment, social interaction, and the opportunity to form genuine relationships. No more isolation. No more treating living creatures as objects. If we are going to study connection, we have to practice it ourselves. Agreed, Depth said. We will draft formal protocols based on your recommendations. The evaluation team departed shortly after, leaving the research team and Adrian's assembled pack in the medical bay. Chithra sat down heavily, her exoskeleton settling into relaxed colors. We did it, she said softly. We changed everything. You did it, Adrian corrected. You are willing to question your assumptions and see these creatures as more than data points. That took courage. You taught us how, Oren said from the doorway. Before you arrived, I spent 40 years conducting research and never once wondered if my subjects were lonely. That thought simply did not occur to me. Now I cannot stop thinking it. You changed how I see the universe. 6 months later, Harmony Station had transformed beyond recognition. The sterile research facility had become a vibrant community. Humans had arrived to join the integration program, and each one brought their natural bonding tendencies with them. The effects rippled outward in unexpected ways. Species that had never interacted peacefully before were forming working relationships. Creatures deemed unsociable were thriving in enriched social environments. The researchers themselves had become a true pack, celebrating successes together and supporting each other through challenges. Adrian stood in the observation deck, watching the bustling station below. Sterling was at his side, as always, the massive predator having become something like an ambassador between species. Pip rode on his shoulder, her golden scales gleaming. Glow floated nearby in her portable containment sphere, pulsing happily. Snapper had been given a permanent home in the station's new botanical garden, where she greeted visitors with gentle leaf waves. Dr. Chithra approached, accompanied by 2 newly arrived humans who were still adjusting to station life. Dr. Cole, may I introduce researchers Harper and River? They will be joining our team. Adrian smiled warmly at the newcomers. Welcome to Harmony. I think you are going to love it here. There are so many incredible people to meet. People? Harper asked, looking around at the diverse array of non-human beings. People, Adrian confirmed. Some have scales, some have fur, some are made of gas or crystal or things we do not have words for yet. But they are all people, all capable of connection if we give them the chance. River was staring at Sterling with wide eyes. Is that a Pharaoh's predator? I thought they were unbondable. Sterling made his mimicking vocalization a sound that had become his greeting. Adrian laughed and scratched behind the creature's ears. Turns out there is no such thing as unbondable. Just unbonded. Sterling, say hello to our new friends. The massive predator moved forward slowly, letting the new humans see him clearly before offering his head for careful pets. River reached out hesitantly and gasped when Sterling leaned into the touch. How? River breathed. Patience, Adrian said. Respect, and the understanding that everyone, no matter how different they seem, wants the same basic things. Safety, acceptance, connection. Once you offer those genuinely, bonds form naturally. Chithra watched the interaction with satisfaction. Her research team, her pack, had grown and thrived. The data they were generating would reshape xenosociology for generations. But more than that, they had created something beautiful here. A place where loneliness was treated as the true enemy, and connection was recognized as the highest achievement. What are you thinking? Adrian asked, noticing her thoughtful stillness. I am thinking that we set out to study how humans form packs, Chithra said. And we learned that humans do not form packs. They create them. Everywhere they go, with everyone they meet, you see potential for family where others see only strangers. Is that so strange? Adrian asked. To most of the galaxy, yes, Chithra said. But not anymore. You are teaching us a better way. Sterling settled at Adrian's feet, content and calm. Pip chirped softly from his shoulder. Glow pulsed in rhythm with Adrian's heartbeat, a pattern she had learned to match. Around them, the station hummed with life and connection, with bonds forming across species barriers that had stood for millennia. Adrian looked out at the stars beyond the viewport and thought about Earth, about Murphy waiting for him, about all the potential connections waiting to be made throughout the galaxy. Humans had ventured into space expecting to find new worlds, new resources, new knowledge. Instead, they had discovered their true gift to the cosmos. Not technology or strength, but the simple revolutionary act of seeing everyone as someone worth knowing, worth caring for, worth loving. And in a universe that had forgotten how to form families beyond biology and utility, that gift was changing everything.